residents of the San Francisco suburb, Daly City, were taken by complete surprise at the events unfolding before them. A U.S. Navy blimp, already flying concerningly low, was descending directly upon them, scraping telephone poles and bouncing from rooftops. Its collision with the ground was imminent. After nearly striking a neighborhood resident who was outside waxing his car at the time, it came to a fairly gentle rest right in the middle of the street, directly in front of the home at 419 Bellevue Avenue. The Navy airship was already a bizarre sight to behold in a residential neighborhood, but what they found inside had them completely baffled. Just after 6 a.m. on August 16, 1942, L-8, the Navy L-class airship, departed Treasure Island in the San Francisco Bay. Piloting the blimp was Lieutenant Ernest DeWitt Cody and his co-pilot, Ensign Charles Ellis Adams. Initially, there was to be a third on board, machinist's mate James Riley Hill. Cody, however, ordered him off the ship just before departure, likely due to concerns over weight. They were starting their rounds on an anti-submarine patrol. These patrols were designed to seek out Japanese submarines that might be lurking in the Pacific off the western coast of the United States. Less than a year removed from the Pearl Harbor attacks, their presence in the Pacific was a constant concern, especially since earlier in the same year, in February of 1942, a Japanese sub shelled the coast at Elwood, California, damaging an oil rig. While the physical damage they caused was negligible, it created a bit of hysteria and put the US on high alert. The situation was so tense following the event, the Office of Naval Intelligence issued a warning that an attack on mainland California was expected within 10 hours. Originally, the aircraft was part of Goodyear's fleet of advertising blimps, but they had been requisitioned by the US Navy for their usefulness in training missions and anti-submarine patrols. They were well suited for these purposes because of their ability to fly slowly at very low altitudes for long periods of time. L-8 was equipped with a .30 caliber machine gun and 2 depth charges, which are explosive devices that are dropped in the water for the purpose of anti-submarine warfare. Though the aircraft was perfectly capable of navigating through poor weather conditions, visibility would not be an issue. The skies on that morning were bright and clear. L-8 began its patrol heading west to the Farallon Islands, also known as the Devil's Teeth Islands, about 27 miles off the coast of San Francisco. It would complete its journey by venturing northeast to Point Reyes, 40 miles south to Montera, and then head back over the Golden Gate Bridge. Less than 2 hours after starting their patrol, just after 7:30 a.m., the crew radioed in to report their position at 4 miles east of the Farallon Islands. Only a few minutes later, they radioed again, saying that they spotted an oil slick in the water, a sign which could indicate the presence of an enemy submarine. Naturally, being diligent in their duties, they went to investigate. This would be the last time Lieutenant Cody and Ensign Adams were ever heard from. Witnesses in a Liberty ship and a fishing boat nearby reportedly saw the blimp descend to about 30 feet above the ocean's surface and drop 2 flares into the water. The flares were intended to mark their position, but some nearby fishermen fled the scene due to concerns that L-8 was going to drop a depth charge on an enemy sub. At around 9 a.m., witnesses saw L-8 dump ballast, rise back into the air, and begin heading back to the east. L-8 would finally appear again a few hours later at roughly 11:15, this time on Ocean Beach, San Francisco. There was clearly something unusual about the situation. It briefly touched down on the beach, bouncing off the sand. Sensing something was amiss, bystanders on the beach grabbed the blimp's tie lines and attempted to hold it down. They later reported being stunned that there was no one in the gondola. It was completely empty. Failing to rein in the aircraft, it again went airborne. It drifted east and smashed into the side of a hill. In the crash, the blimp took some damage to one of its propellers, and one of its 325-pound depth charges became dislodged and rolled down the hill. The drop in weight helped L-8 to gain altitude once again. However, it wouldn't be airborne for long. The low-hanging aircraft floated over the Olympic Club golf course, much to the astonishment of the golfers below. By this point, An automatic valve inside L-8 had been releasing helium, causing it to descend. As the helium depleted, the blimp started collapsing into a V shape. Crowds of people began forming and watching in amazement as the airship slowly dipped toward the ground. Upon noticing the situation, police and firemen chased down the rogue blimp. Residents of Daly City were both frightened and confused upon seeing the blimp ricocheting off roofs and colliding with utility poles. Fortunately, however, none of them were harmed. At 11:30 a.m., L-8 came to rest on the ground. It struck the utility pole in front of the home at 419 Bellevue Avenue, breaking off the crossarm and causing a brief shower of sparks as the tail of the aircraft struck the wires. Once things settled down enough for the crowd to get a closer look, they noticed that, somehow, the gondola was empty. Some bystanders took pictures of the highly unusual event. Those pictures, however, were immediately confiscated by police upon their arrival. The military took immediate action to search for the missing men. Firemen on scene cut open the envelope of the blimp, fearing the crew may have somehow become stuck inside. It was empty. Even more baffling, everything was still in place. The radio was still switched on, and no distress calls had been made. The parachutes and rubber raft were still on board. The only things missing were the life vests and the depth charge. But this was not unusual, since it was standard procedure for pilots to wear their life vests while in flight, and the depth charge had rolled down the hill and was later recovered at the golf course. Eerily, the only thing the condition of the L-8 told the rescuers was that Cody and Adams were missing. The Navy searched the waters off the Pacific coast for days, but turned up nothing. It seemed the men had vanished without a trace, having come up completely empty. Just a couple days later, on August 18th, the search was called off. Several theories have been suggested to explain the disappearance. At first, the Navy hypothesized that they must have bailed out of the blimp while over the water, but this didn't make sense. While the control hatch was found to have been left open, everything else was in order, especially considering the parachutes had not been used. A board of investigation was put together by the Navy, but due to lack of evidence, all they were able to conclude was that L-8 had not been shot down or burned, nor had it come into contact with the sea. Other theories, undoubtedly fueled by the invasion hysteria, abounded. One such theory was that they were captured by a Japanese submarine. Another was that they were spies for the Japanese, rendezvoused with an I-boat offshore, and escaped. Perhaps the most speculative theory suggested that one of the men, in a fight over the affections of a woman, murdered the other, but fell out when attempting to toss the body overboard. At the time of this recording, it has been just shy of 81 years since the mysterious vanishing of the crew aboard L-8, and we have since gained zero additional evidence or insight about what happened. The currently accepted theory is that, while tossing the flare out into the water, one of the crew members slipped out of the hatch. While hanging onto the hatch, he called for assistance to the other, who attempted rescue, but instead resulted in both of them falling into the ocean, leaving the ghost blimp to drift aimlessly. Having suffered minimal damage, L-8 was quickly repaired and returned to service. After the war, it was sold back to the Goodyear Company, renamed America, and regularly flew over sporting events before being retired in 1982. 1 year after the crash, in 1943, Ernest DeWitt Cody and Charles Ellis Adams were officially declared deceased. While we may never know the cause of their disappearance, we must remember their legacy of bravery in protecting their fellow countrymen in time of war. If you enjoyed this short documentary, I highly recommend watching my video on the Donora Death Fog, which tells the story of a mysterious yellow haze that fell upon the city of Donora, Pennsylvania in 1948, with deadly consequences. Thanks for watching. Until next time.